Chapter 2 is returning in less than a week, and this could ruin Fortnite forever. It may seem good to experience the map again and get flooded with all the memories, but there are multiple downsides, so let's get into it. We all know OG Fortnite had a great success, managing to get 44.7 million total unique players in just one day, and 102 million hours of playtime. OG Fortnite only lasted 1 month, but do you think if this season lasted longer, the player count would as well? Because they only had 1 month to experience this map and relive their childhood memories, that may be why the player count was so high. Obviously they would still have a high player count, but majority would just get bored and move on. So why would the return of Chapter 2 be so bad? One reason is because all the casual players will return to experience the season again, and the skill gap between the sweats and them is massive. So once they start dying, they're going to start complaining. Yes, they can play zero build and unranked, but the enjoyment just won't be there. Everyone next year November will be expecting a Chapter 3 return. This is where Fortnite will go downhill. The return of OG Fortnite Chapter 2 may be good, but doing this 3 years in a row will cause repetition and not as much excitement. Also, Chapter 3 may have been one of the worst seasons. I don't have the exact player count, but here is a graph. Chapter 3 was released on December 5th, 2021. As you can see at the top of the graph, this is where the season was released, and compared to all the other months, the player count is down massively. Also, why OG Fortnite was such a big hit is because every week they were changing the map and the loot pool. So if 1 week you didn't enjoy the loot, you had the other weeks to play. And this also kept the player count high. In Chapter 2, this was when everyone was in quarantine, staying at home and playing video games. That's why this chapter is so talked about and hyped up. But realistically, this is when the game became sweaty and when people started to quit. But not everything is on the downside. If we look at current day Fortnite Chapter 5 Season 4, it's completely different from Chapter 2. We have a whole new movement system which people are complaining about daily, so once Chapter 2 returns we should get the old movement back, and with the following seasons it should stay as well. There actually has been a couple hints of the OG movement coming back when in creative there's a bug with it. Moving on from movement in the season, we also have medallions and many collabs such as Iron Man, Black Panther and more. In Chapter 2 we won't be seeing any of this, which is great for the players who will play the game for a month and dip, but for the regular players the enjoyment won't be there. Yes, maybe for the first week or two it will be fun seeing the OG POIs, but when it comes down to it, it won't be as good. Also in our current chapter we have Fizz and jetpacks to rotate with, so these items will both be removed in Chapter 2. Going into Chapter 2 I'm wondering what items they will bring back to rotate with, because we have to bear in mind competitive players. Personally, I think bounce pads will be a great addition because you can take height with them easy and it's quite hard to rotate with. I think they should cap them at 10 so then it's not too overpowered. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about this. Another thing to keep in mind about rotation is the Catty shockwave launcher. It's very overpowered because it's literally an infinite shockwave machine. In endgame, you're going to get shockwaved out of zone or your build will be breaking. Yes, you'll have to land Catty corner to earn this, but it's still going to be very overpowered. Also, launch pads were in this chapter, which is the most overpowered mobility because you can literally just launch across the map. You may get beamed out of the sky, but when everyone has launch pads in their inventory, I doubt that will be happening. This will just make endgames more stacked and harder because everyone will be stacked with mats, shield, due to not be losing any on their rotates. Donald Mustard, the original creator of Fortnite, retired in 2023. This means going into the return of Chapter 2, we will have new developers and creators in charge of bringing us back, and they won't see their vision as well. Also going back to Chapter 3, potentially returning next year, Chapter 3 was the shortest season of Fortnite, only having 4 seasons. Now this may be because it had such a low player count, but this was also the time Donald Mustard dropped out of Fortnite. Chapter 1 is Fortnite's best chapter because of how simple it was. The map was perfect, nothing was too overcomplicated with. The simplicity of it made it great. Now if we fast forward in time, we have a whole metaverse and collab POIs, which is ruining the game, but that's a whole different story. The point is, Chapter 2 wasn't as good as Chapter 1, so the return won't be as hyped, and if they continue bringing back these chapters every year, the enjoyment just isn't going to be there. If we look back in time when we had the first Fortnite event with the rocket, the reason for it being so good was because no one knew what was going to happen. We were all experiencing it in real time. But if we fast forward now, it's just a collab some way or another, or before the live event it will just be leaked all over Twitter. Don't get me wrong, Chapter 2 was a great chapter. I would say it's the second best one, which is quite ironic, but this was when vaults, bosses and mythics were first added to the game. Sharks were added, rotation was stacked, but this was also when the game started to get very competitive. In Chapter 1 everyone was noobs, this is when we first started playing. we could barely build and we would camp in bushes to get our wins. But in chapter 2 it was much different. This was when the skill level started to increase massively. Another thing to remember about chapter 2 is it was filled with bot lobbies. Now this was the time when you could play with your mobile friends, but even when you were playing solos, the lobbies would be filled with bots. I'm guessing this is because they don't have enough real players to fill the lobbies. And this was the first introduction of bots. Nowadays when you see a bot you kill them without a thought. In chapter 1 there was no such thing as bots, it was just very bad defaults who just starting out the game and having fun. But when chapter 2 was released the lobby started to fill with bots, and this lost the touch of the game because it didn't feel as real. In chapter 1 your heart will be beating 130 beats per second.
Got you! Max! Got you! Max is down, Max is down, behind you, behind you, behind you! No! Go! Hit it for 150!
But when you're killing bots it's just not the same and doesn't feel like you've earned the win. You'd rather have 5 kills on real people than 10 AI kills because it doesn't feel like you've achieved anything. With chapter 2 also came the most hated POI being Coral Castle. This was because of how open it was, and on top of that there was no loot or any mats, so it's understandable. I wonder if they'll even bother bring this POI back in November. Looking at the map we have Slurpee Swamp. This is where multiple hill game glitches took place.
Come on, give it to me. Pray. Yes! Let's go!
And we have to keep in mind our current season we don't have any water that gives us shield like Slurpee. Slurpee Swamp was filled with slurp barrels everywhere, but most importantly you gain shield from the swamp, so this will be very overpowered going into this chapter. Another overpowered POI to keep in mind is Steamy Stacks. Now you may be thinking, oh what about Castle Doom, isn't that the same? Well I would argue it isn't, as Castle Doom you have lots of smoke blocking your view. You can also take full damage if you're up on high and don't put fizz, jumping into it you will die. As Steamy Stacks you have 2 massive towers, also in one of the buildings there's an infinite shield healing tub, similar to the Slurpee Swamp water. Steamy Stacks you can cap out your metal, and I could be wrong but I think you can glide further than at Castle Doom, and it's just better to get shots on. Also if they done what they did with Fortnite OG, changing the map every week, we have to keep in mind the chapter 2 was flooded and turned into a water season. That's why sharks were added. This means for competitive players it will be harder to rotate and you'll waste more mats and hills doing so. If we have a look at the loot pool in this chapter, there's multiple broken weapons, the obvious being the mythic minigun. Then we have the recon scanner, which is a gun where you can shoot and scan the area and it has infinite charges. This is so overpowered we have a medallion of it now. This chapter also has a very spray meta, we have the P90s and multiple other SMGs. On top of that there's about 6 different fish items in this game, one being slurp fish, the most overpowered fish till this day, spicy fish and jellyfish. Anyways, I'm going to wrap up the video here. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in chapter 2. Peace.